Alright, so the next game we're going to talk about has awesome graphics. Graphics have always been a hot topic in the gaming world, especially when talking about how to improve quality from generation to generation. Add more realism, we need HD, we need 4K. If I don't see a raindrop go all the way down my windshield, I'm looking at garbage. Personally, this idea of pushing graphical quality was never as important as exploring different art styles. I was never one to buy a game over another because this one's more realistic looking.
It's so relatable.
If anything, I wanted something that gave my eyeballs something fun and colorful to look at, to push the bounds not on realism but on the artist's imagination and what visuals they were able to deliver. To put it simply, I just like colors, okay? Even now, I'm rarely sold on a game based on visuals alone, but sometimes there are games that have a clear vision for their look and really go all in on it. Games where you can feel the developer's passion for delivering a specific art style. Games like Eastward. Eastward was first revealed in November 2015 from Pixpill, the Shanghai-based game developer. Around this time, Pixpill made some forum posts describing the game as having Zelda-like gameplay and a JRPG style of story. These posts contain impressive-looking screenshots and GIFs that reveal the artistic direction being a quote-unquote retro pixel plus 3D lighting style. And it didn't take long for people to get interested. You can see improvement between then and now, but even then, the pixel art looked amazingly detailed. That was what got me on board, and it's been on my top anticipated indie games ever since. After much waiting on our end, and even a difficult time for Pixpill where they had to redo work that was lost during their transition to a remote setup, seriously, kudos to them for pushing through that. Eastward is finally released, and I'm so excited to talk about how well it turned out. Spoiler warning, I've attempted to be vague enough not to mention big spoilers or any real plot points. That being said, I still encourage playing the game to experience the story firsthand. So with that out of the way, grab a train ticket and strap in. We're going for a ride. In a decayed world where human colonies are scarce and separated from one another, you play as two protagonists, John and Sam. They both live in an underground settlement where people view the surface as a fairy tale and condemn the mere thought of its potential existence. John is a quiet, gruff-looking individual who works as a miner, but for the most part, he's seen as a reliable worker and doesn't step out of line. During one of his shifts, he discovers an abandoned train containing a test tube where he finds Sam. At that point, he takes her in and becomes a sort of father figure to her. As for Sam, well, she's adorable. She quickly establishes herself as a normal young girl who is easily excitable and curious about the world. Sam constantly shows compassion and is quick to call out any injustice happening to others. Maybe it's more her excitement talking and her habit of getting caught up in everything, but in the end, she is a sweetheart. As one would expect, John and Sam eventually find their way to the surface where they travel a certain cardinal direction. Haven't cracked the code on that one yet. During your adventure, you'll travel to different settlements, meet a cast of over 200 characters, all extremely distinguishable from one another, and unravel the mystery of where Sam came from. It's worth noting that Eastward is a longer game, mainly due to how the story is presented. Tomo Zhou, one of the founders of Pixpill, commented, "The most influential inspiration comes from the Mother game series. Milan," referring to Hong Milan, another founder responsible for the game's artistic direction, was a huge fan of it, and we both equally admired the way it presents the world and tells its story. It plays like an animated movie. That's the target we were aiming for. In contrast to most immediate gratification experiences we have in the modern age, Eastward's pacing takes inspiration from 90s anime and Studio Ghibli films. I'm talking about elements purposely added that forces you to slow down and take in what's in front of you. How after an intense sequence, things calm down and your movement is slowed to a walk to make you spend more time in the moment. There are cutscenes that show John and Sam sitting down for dinner and then going to bed. No important message is being sent here, it's just showing them completing their day. These types of moments are never intrusive enough to have you start spamming the skip button, but it's just enough to get you to take that breath and slow down, to be present with the characters and the story. Being more narrative-driven, Eastward's gameplay is the break you'll get between story segments. It'll either consist of helping NPCs in the settlement or exploring the surrounding area and dungeons, where you'll fight off mushrooms, slugs, zombies, swamp creatures. Just your typical run-of-the-mill, I can't even say it with a straight face. You encounter some pretty weird stuff. And it's not just the enemies. Even the act of saving can mess with your head.
If you were to get someone else's memory, would you be you or them?
What? Oh. I see what you're doing, trying to be deep, trying to make me think. That's good. Would I be me? This is where you really feel the dynamic between John and Sam come alive. Not only is it enjoyable to see from the story, but it's equally as fun when you're out in the field. In the first couple areas, you only play as John. He's capable of using different weapons, which includes his frying pan, his primary melee weapon and favorite piece of kitchenware. Eventually, you unlock Sam's abilities, and she'll join you as well. Now, she can't damage most enemies. She can, however, use bubble-like magic to stun them, along with casting other support-based spells she learns along the journey. In early iterations of Eastward, Sam was only following John around, but it was reworked so she would have more of a role in this dual-player setup and help her stand out more. Not only did it help with that aspect, but it made Eastward's dungeon crawling and combat stand out. You see, going in pans a-blazing with John just won't cut it. He's prone to take damage, and you usually don't have a ton of health to spare. However, switching between the two is not only necessary, but seamless. You can stun an enemy from far away, switch to John as you rush in, and start wailing on him with your frying pan. Outside of combat, there are satisfying puzzles to solve that will have you utilize both John and Sam's strengths, such as John's literal strength to move things around and Sam's size to crawl through small tunnels. By mid-game, you'll find yourself switching between the two like a master, and I gotta say, it's super satisfying when you're in this teamwork mindset. Talk about the colors! We've had some good-looking pixel art games that not only deliver great visuals, but they raise the bar on what can be accomplished with this style. Eastward takes that bar and launches it even higher. The level of detail in every scene is jaw-droppingly gorgeous. A good chunk of the overall game's enjoyment is simply walking into every building, every room of that building, every dungeon, every nook and cranny of the outdoors, and just soaking it all in. It's impressive how difficult it is to pick out reused assets, especially in the more urban settings. From every section of the map to every room you're in is its own unique thing. It just seems like every pixel was placed in a certain spot and served its own purpose, all towards exploring this world full of an insane amount of detail. With more modern techniques such as 3D lighting and this sort of grainy, nostalgic looking filter on top of everything, Eastward easily establishes its own unique pixel art style. In fact, this style is what got Chucklefish on board in the first place, who are no stranger to creating games with great looking pixel art as well. If the pixel art is equal to detail, then the animation is equal to life. But opposed to the animations you see highlighted in the trailer, I want to talk about the subtle animations that help bring Eastward to life during quieter moments. Don't get me wrong, the parts where the animation gets more elaborate during fights or cutscenes are well done too, of course. You can tell a lot of the animation budget went towards that, and it paid off. But the more subtle animations just stood out to me. Like when you're just walking around and notice the twinkle of a red gem looking thing or water dripping onto the road. When you're in the middle of a conversation and you look over to wheat blowing in the wind, structures on houses turning, or the lapping of water against the shoreline. If you stood still and made a GIF from any area in the game, you can almost guarantee there will be some kind of movement going on to give each scene this breath of life to it. Where Eastward excels in art direction and has arguably solid gameplay, it's gotten mixed reviews on the story pacing and main plot itself. In any game that has a narrative, there's always this fine line of balancing story and gameplay. It's an easy scale to tip. Too much of one and you'll start longing for the other. Eastward, by design, tips more towards the story. But with that being said, it wasn't noticeable that often. Sure, there were a few parts where I longed to be swinging the old frying pan around, but all in all, it didn't happen enough to noticeably diminish my enjoyment. Now regarding the plot, it's quite a ride. The opening movie and title screen will have you asking questions before you even press start. My biggest gripe was that there were some story elements introduced that were vaguely explained and hinted at, but not elaborated on to give you that full clarity. It felt more like Pixpill was relying on the player to connect things together, which is a bit of a risky choice specifically for a narrative-driven game, as it can lead to people feeling less satisfied and more confused when things wrap up. Overall though, I found the story super engaging and appreciated it throwing new things your way every chapter. And whether or not this is just my doofus brain missing obvious plot points that explain things, this criticism just comes more from an accessibility perspective on understanding the story itself. So, if you pay attention, take a breath, and take your time, this albeit confusing narrative at times is something worth losing yourself in. Even if your brain gets fried trying to make sense of everything. Eastward is one of those games that will stick with you long after you finish playing. While I got on board for the art style, it also delivers a deep story, engaging dual-player gameplay, and plenty of character development. Seeing John and Sam's relationship grow stronger throughout the adventure was so rewarding. That was a consistent theme throughout the journey, both in gameplay and story, which I loved seeing. And even with some criticisms such as the story and the pacing, I'd still recommend letting yourself get immersed into this decayed yet beautiful world. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised to see Eastward rank amongst one of the top indies to date. It's simply something you don't want to miss out on. And that's Eastward, so I'm gonna go ahead and save my game and make sure we're all good there.
It took us so much effort to figure out a way to save our memories. But what if those memories you save aren't the real you?
Oh. No. No! I need a drink.
What is the meaning of life?
I just want some milk.
Oh, stop, you big baby.
Look at that.